body, right? We look at the idea that I understood that they mentioned is that by looking at the feelings, the suffering goes away. And I wonder if it's just because I don't follow it, or because there is another factor.
Yeah. And in that practice, it's focused primarily on the body, and it's to observe pleasant, unpleasant, neutral sensations, and just observe them arise and pass. Right. And as I mentioned, I think briefly yesterday, this is this mental factor of feeling or sensation, whatever name you want to give it, where I said that this was a very good point to sort of break the process, or at least reduce the process, because it's on the basis of pleasant and unpleasant feelings and sensations that we start to react with attachment, aversion, and the whole thing becomes a big mess. So if at that point, through this practice in particular, we can get in the habit of just observing pleasant, unpleasant sensations in the body, or observing pleasant, unpleasant feelings in the mind, then we can bring that into daily life. Because in meditation we're beginning to develop the habit of just observing pleasant and unpleasant things, either in the body or the mind. And then we can bring that into daily life, which means that when we receive pleasant or unpleasant stimulus in our life, then instead of reacting with attachment, aversion, we can respond in a more meaningful and effective way. So it's very effective in really reducing attachment and aversion, and then a lot of our dysfunctional behaviour based on that. But of course, at the deeper level, as long as we still have that self-grasping, then that won't get us out of suffering altogether. I mean, what it will do in a practical way will quite reduce a lot of our suffering, but still, as long as we have that false sense of grasping, then things can still arise, mental afflictions and suffering can still arise. So it's a very effective short-term strategy, and also that realization of impermanence, apart from the fact of not reacting to pleasant, unpleasant, the realization that things are arising, passing, that realization of impermanence is getting us quite a way towards realizing emptiness. Because if we can understand impermanence at the subtle level, that everything's just flow, then how can anything exist independently? So that also can be a very good basis for then the emptiness practice. But we need then to move into the Vipasana practice of emptiness if we want to eliminate all the self-grasping at the more subtle level. So that impermanence practice, it's not so complicated, and it gets us into the body out of our conceptual mind. It helps us to reduce attachment, aversion, and it also is a good basis for that other emptiness practice. So for that reason, I think it's a good practice to begin with and to focus on, because it gives a lot of benefit initially, and then also helps to build the basis for the emptiness practice as well.
I just want to make sure I understood. There is the flow of thoughts and flow of atoms that in each seconds comprise the person. Okay?
Sure.
So in each second this changes. So actually I have the wrong conception that I'm the same, but I'm actually not the same.
That's right.
It's just a definition.
I think even in medical science, after 7 years, is it? We have a 100% different body. We don't have one single cell the same. This is me. It's the same me. It's the me when I was young, you know. Don't we say that? When I was young, as if it's the same me that was when we were 10 years old and 20 and 40. Yeah. And so, of course, intellectually, it's easy to understand this change, but again, experientially, is that how we behave? I don't think so. We behave. That was me, you know, 20 years ago. Okay. What I'd like to do now is go to another Vipassana practice. When we start to look at this idea of emptiness and that there's no independent world, no independent me, we can begin to appreciate that, everything is existing within our conceptual framework, everything's coming from the mind. And then it could be easy to say, well, since everything's coming from the mind is the real thing. Everything else is like an illusion. But because everything's coming from the mind is the one true reality. And actually there's a sort of one of the philosophical schools in Buddhism sort of comes to this conclusion. So what I'd like to do now is a Vipassana practice where we are not looking for the findable me, but we're looking for the findable mind. Is there a mind to be found anywhere? So we're going to focus on the mind, and we're going to use a little bit of an approach that is used in what's called Maha Mudra. It's a nature of the mind style practice. So we're going to do a little Vipassana practice there, focusing on the mind. Okay? So let's do that now. So preparing the body, setting it into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. Allowing the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm. And with each out-breath, letting go of any thoughts that may have arisen, happily releasing them. Simply allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment, focusing on the sensations of the breath throughout the body. maintaining an ongoing flow of mindfulness of the sensations of the breath throughout the entire cycle of each in and out breath. Now, where is the mind that is observing the breath? Can the mind be found? Is it findable? Where is the mind located? Is the mind somewhere inside the body? Is the mind somewhere inside the head? Is the mind located at the place where the sensations of the breath are occurring? Is the mind located somewhere outside the body? Are there places where the mind isn't located? Does the mind have a center? Does the mind have a particular size? Is it very small? Is it very large? Does the mind have a physical limit or boundary? Does the mind have any identifiable characteristics at all? Now release all appearances and simply allow the mind to come to rest. Without doing anything at all. Just be. Just be present. Just be aware of being aware. Any questions about that meditation?
You explained the emptiness of the plant, or object, or the object.
Yeah.
It was quite understandable. But how can you explain the emptiness of something like of the me or the mind?
Yeah. That's why generally when this presentation of emptiness dependent arising is presented in the text, they'll use an object, physical object, because it's easier to see. Whereas the person is already something a little bit more elusive, and then the mind becomes even more elusive because it doesn't have any physical properties whatsoever. And many of us have never really observed our own minds. We're always looking out. But there's a number of systems of practice, including this one I mentioned, Maha Mudra, where the emphasis is to focus on the mind, both in the shamatha practice, where we're just developing a calm, clear, focused mind, and normally the most emphasized object there in Buddhism is the breath, the abdomen or nostrils. But in the Maha Mudra, it's just observing our own mind is the object. And if we observe our own mind as the object, then slowly, the characteristics of the mind become more obvious, more clear to us, because now we're sort of looking out. We never look at our own mind. And then on that basis, then we can go into Vipasana practice to investigate this mind and how it exists. So many people find this first initially challenging because it's not something, it's more subtle, and it's not something that we're used to observing. So, but it does bring enormous benefits, and I can really highly recommend both the shamatha and Vipassana practice observing the mind, and they're very much emphasized, this focus is emphasized, particularly in there's two schools of Tibetan Buddhism, the Kagyu school and the Nyingma school. They particularly emphasize this approach. In the Kagyu school, the system of practice is called Maha Mudra, and in the Nyingma school it's called Dzogchen. So in both of those systems of practice, there is really the emphasis on focusing on the mind. But you're right, as a beginner, it's quite, where is this mind? Not so easy. But we can follow great Indian master Shantideva from the 8th century. His advice is, in general, no matter how difficult something seems, everything with practice becomes easy. So all we need to do is practice.
Maha Mudra you can find in the internet?
Yeah. I mean, there's something that is within the Kagyu tradition, and also I sort of do a lot of work in that field as well, in the Maha Mudra field. So I also teach that approach as well sometimes. Question?
Yeah, first of all, about the Maha Mudra, I think I read a book about it, but of course something related to Tantra.
Well, see, Maha Mudra is a system of practice focusing on the mind, and like we saw, there we can do that at a number of levels. So at the highest level, Maha Mudra practice involves the Vajrayana Tantra level of practice.
Yeah.
And even in there's another level sort of higher than that, which I won't go into.
Yeah.
But there are levels, yeah.
Besides that, I found in this meditation, like somehow the mind is sort of like an array of thoughts, and somehow kind of like I forgot how to say it. Like when you display a picture on the wall, I forgot the name of the technology of it.
The project.
Projector.
Projector, yeah.
Yeah.
Like projects all the time. So it's changing. The first one disappears.
Yeah.
I don't know what's the next one is.
Yeah. So this is, as I said in the shamatha practice, if we're observing the mind, this is sort of the experience we have, is that we have this experience, this is just this constant. And of course what we do now is we're not observing that, but when something comes up, we latch onto it and we follow it.
Yeah.
And so we get caught up in our stories, and so this comes more and more because we keep feeding it by following this stuff, and then we get overwhelmed by it. So in this shamatha practice where you observe the mind, if you can just observe the mind, and when you first do, you'll notice, but every time you can observe that arising, passing, we're not feeding it, which means the habit of this coming up will, over time, will get slow, and then we'll notice instead of this, we'll notice, and then eventually still. So normally now we fight with our mind to make it still. That's just like throwing petrol on the fire. It just makes it worse. We don't have to fight. We just don't get caught up in it. Just sit back and watch the movie. Watch the show. Don't get caught up in the show. If we watch the show, then there's no problem. In fact, if we watch the show, none of these things can harm us. Because if you look at what a thought, emotional memory is, I mean, it's virtually nothing. It has no power to harm us from its own side. It can only harm us if we identify with it and get caught up in it or try to suppress it. Then it harms us.
But while watching it, I wonder if the Buddhism how the Buddhism what's the meaning of these thoughts?
Meaning.
If there is a meaning, I mean, if there is some sort of while I watch the show, is there any meaning for this show?
Most of our show is quite meaningless, and it's coming from memories, it's coming from cultural things, it's coming from many things. And of course what happens is that when one comes up, that stimulates another one, and so it's just like
and the solution is just to observe it.
Well, the first step is not to get caught up in the show. You know, we can watch the show and enjoy it. If we get caught up in it, we get overwhelmed.
There's no meaning to what I see.
A lot of the stuff that comes up, I mean, of course, we purposely often generate thoughts when we want to, and that's useful. But a lot of this stuff is not purposely generated. They're just like, and it just comes from our conditioning, our habits, and all that. But with this sort of practices, particularly shamatha practice, we can get to a stage where our mind naturally is quite still, and only we generate thoughts purposely when it's useful to think about something. And other than that, our rest state is stillness. Now our rest state is like chaos.
I would like to go over the meditation like the previous one, because I could answer each question here, but
Yeah.
it's based on what I know of the Buddhism,
Yeah.
expects me to say that it was
Yes.
somehow less intuitive like previous meditations.
Yeah. So with this one, again, the idea is to look from our direct experience and not, and not answer the question based on our study or intellectual background. That's not the purpose here. The purpose is to look directly at the mind.
I find it hard. It couldn't be in previous meditations today, I could do it yesterday. But
Yeah, yeah.
now I have to, because if you ask where is the mind, how big it is. I think it's more.
Yeah.
Buddhist method.
Yeah. So what can be helpful then is actually just sit there and observe the mind. Just rest in that. Because this is like this shamatha practice, but what you'll sometimes find is that just simply resting in the mind and observing the mind without this questioning, as the mind quietens down, as the conceptual mind quietens down, then we start to see more directly. And then, even without questioning, sometimes just by sitting there and watching, go, wow, there's no limit, without doing the questioning. So you often find that these come simply through the shamatha practice of quieting the mind and sitting there and watching. So I think this can be a good start, is to do the shamatha practice to really quieten the mind a bit, to get out of our conceptual mind, and then just watch. And then if we want, every so often we can ask a little question, if we feel that it's useful. And then we're in a state of looking directly rather than still getting caught up in our conceptual thinking, and then we'll conceptually answer the question.
But how do we find where the mind is, and if it's different from the brain? This does not come from.
So again, what you'll find is, particularly through the shamatha practice, the mind will become more calm, more clear, more focused. And then in that state, then this sort of investigation becomes much easier, particularly with the mind. So I would recommend going into the shamatha practice and developing a more stable, clear mind, and then I think you'll find this whole exercise will be vastly different. Yeah.
I have two questions.
Sure.
One is about sometimes during meditation, if I'm concentrating on my breath, for example, at the same time while I'm concentrating, I'm also thinking, and I'm doing both of them.
Sure.
So what am I doing about the?
Yeah, well, you try and let go of that and focus more sharply on the breath. So
just come back to.
Yeah, come back to the breath and just keep sharpening the focus. And the more you do that, you'll find that this background noise will slowly, over time, will dissipate. It'll take time.
Okay. The second question that I have is related to what he said. That sometimes, if our mind is like this, and there's a lot of things happening there, we can realize things from it. Like we can develop ourselves from it.
Correct.
There's
Correct,
a
that's right.
benefit to it.
Only if we can observe those things. If we get caught up in them, we don't learn anything because we're caught up in it. So that's this whole shamatha practice, is it'll be going like this, and our mind goes like this now, but we don't watch the show, we get caught up in the show, and then we don't learn anything because we're caught up in it. It's when you can step back and watch the show, then you can go, oh, look at that. Oh, wow. This is how my mind is dysfunctional. And we can learn a lot. So in this practice, we're not trying to make the mind still. We just observe whatever's there. And if there's a lot there, you're right, we can learn about it, as long as we can watch the show and not get caught up in it.
You were saying before that eventually it will go down.
And by that time, you've learnt a lot about your mind, and you can use that to go deeper into the Vipassana practice. We don't need to keep having the show at that time, because the show can interfere a little bit with other things.
So are you saying there's a limit of how much we can learn from the
No.
this thing? Because if in some point it goes away and most of the time you're still, your mind is still,
And then when
unless you need something,
right, and then you learn from that.
Aren't you missing something?
No. You're missing a chaotic, turbulent mind. I think that's a good thing to miss, or to not have. Okay, what I'd like to do now is have a look at how we progress in the spiritual path using this Vipassana practice. And we'll be using this chart here, the Mahayana Path chart. think there's a few spare ones here, if anyone doesn't have one. So yesterday we talked about the stages of practice in general, and first stage was this in Tibetan Go, meaning to get some intellectual understanding of the concept and the practice. But then intellectual understanding, of course, is not enough to transform our life. We need to bring that into experience through meditation. So we meditate on whatever the topic is we're interested in. We come to Nyam, which is an experience or taste of that in meditation. And we'll use the example of impermanence. I think we all probably have this first step already. We intellectually understand impermanence. Then we bring that into practice. We meditate on impermanence, maybe by scanning the body, observing the mind, or other phenomena. And then we come to experientially see things changing moment by moment, moment by moment. And then that, if that can be a deeper experience, then that can still be affecting us after the meditation. And then during that time, we'll experientially see things as changing moment by moment. Then we're much more in sync with reality. You'll find less mental afflictions and less suffering. But then, of course, we want to stabilize that so that it's not just a transient experience. And so the third stage is Tok, is realization. And to realize something, to directly realize something, we need to be having a very stable and clear mind. We need this mind of shamatha. With that very stable, clear, focused mind of shamatha, we can penetrate, we can come to directly realize impermanence, no self, emptiness, compassion, all of these things. Then that is a very stable experience that will continue in our day. So here then, in our emptiness practice, then we are going through those same three stages. And as we go through those three stages, we can progress along the spiritual path. And that is this diagram here, this Mahayana Path. So this is talking about the path to enlightenment. And we can see here that it is divided into sort of 5 stages or 5 paths. Path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, path of no more learning. So these are the stages we go through as we deepen particularly this Vipasana practice of emptiness. And we can see that at the beginning of the path, down underneath we have a number 2. And number 2 says, uncontrived renunciation bodhicitta. So remember we said that to enter this Mahayana path to enlightenment, we first need to develop the aspiration for enlightenment, which was this bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. So once we really develop that bodhicitta, so it's uncontrived. Uncontrived here means that now, of course, we can sit down, we can think, well, everyone's suffering, I'd like to really help them, and so I really want to achieve enlightenment so I can help everyone else overcome suffering. And then we can sort of, for a few moments, maybe have a little bit this aspiration. And then, of course, it disappears. We need to strengthen that to a point where that motivation of bodhicitta is there with us all day. And it's everything we do is through that motivation of bodhicitta. That's uncontrived. So once we get to that point of having that motivation as spontaneous and continuous through the day, then we have actually entered the Mahayana path to enlightenment. The first stage here is called the Path of Accumulation. Here the word accumulation means accumulating the two main practices of wisdom and compassion. So it means we're doing a lot of compassionate activities, virtuous activities, and we're working on the wisdom practice here, particularly emptiness practice. Now, on this first stage of the path, and now when we meditate on emptiness, we may get to the point of this not finding this me, and we hold that experience. That's an experience of emptiness. But in that experience, for us as beginners, there's still a sense of me, the meditator, experiencing this not finding. So there's still a little bit a conceptual or dualistic experience. There's still a sense of a meditator and the object, the emptiness, the not finding that I'm experiencing. So even on Path of Accumulation, there's still that experience. So on the Path of Accumulation, of course, the nyam, or the experience, has actually come to realization. But in realization here, for this emptiness, we can talk about two levels of realization. Conceptual and direct. Because when we've entered this path of accumulation, we have achieved shamatha, this stable, clear, focused mind. So now when we have this experience, it becomes very stable. But still, it's what's called a conceptual realization of emptiness, meaning that even here, there's still a sense of me, the meditator, realizing this thing, emptiness, this not finding. And then we can continue on the path of accumulation. We get to the next stage, path of preparation. Here the word preparation means we're preparing for our first direct, non-conceptual realization of emptiness. So we are deepening our experience of emptiness. And it's said here that when we enter the path of preparation, we have our shamatha and vipassana now become what's called unified. They're now supporting each other fully. But